Hello, and welcome to episode 32 of Unlimited Opinions. I'm Adam Bishop.
I'm Mark Bishop.
And of course, we are reading Anthony Kenny's A New History of Western Philosophy, and this chapter is, again, in the modern era of philosophy, from Freud to Derrida. Any thoughts on that? I feel like I always start off the podcast this way. I just say the title and then ask if you have any thoughts, and that's not really a good way to start things.
Well, you say the title and then you
Well, I
wait for me
always expect for you to say something, and then you never do.
You expect for some sort of color commentary as of the title. It was interesting. Freud's always a wild read. You know, his theories and stuff, and I do. We'll get to it, but I never heard of this Derrida guy. I was just ignorant of him, but the other ones I thought were very interesting. And
yes,
as far as the summary of who they were and kind of like their general theories of philosophy and stuff. Mm-hmm. Neat chapter. It's fun to read. It was an easy read.
It was an easy read. It's pretty short, so.
Oh, is that why?
Well, I don't know, but it was entertaining. I think the anecdotes in this were very interesting.
It was I don't know if he had a better copy editor for this chapter or not. Or maybe because these are more modern. Maybe
insulting Anthony Kenny. He's still alive, by the way.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Huh. He's pretty old, but yeah, he's still around.
Yeah.
And he's still doing interviews and things, I think.
Is that right?
Yeah.
We should do a road trip
and see Anthony Kenny.
Yeah.
I think he's British.
I know, it'd be a long road.
So starting off with Freud and psychoanalysis, and of course Sigmund Freud, very famous for being a psychologist. And what he really developed in the field of psychology is psychoanalysis, which is just an exchange of words between patient and doctor. And he kind of developed this theory that's still prevalent today, and that childhood trauma leads to a lot of our mental health symptoms and issues in the mental sort of capacity. And his solution to that was through free association. So basically where a doctor sits down with a patient, just asks them to just kind of talk about their trauma, and that was thought to just kind of help them work their way through their own issues and kind of resolve those symptoms affecting their mental health.
Yeah, and I think Kenny even says in here, he doesn't use the words I would, which is basically all his theories are like crackpot theories as far as the origins of your mental problems. You know, he does say that Freud considered himself a scientist, but every theory that he had was shown to lack any sort of scientific foundation. But I think he's right on with the psychoanalysis. You know, I think it's underappreciated and underutilized now. There's too many people on chemicals, and I think there is something to me. It's kind of analogous to going to confession.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean, Kenny kind of says like it's unsure whether or not these led to like direct like mechanical like your actual brain processing these things like actually physically, or if it just made the patient feel like they have more freedom over their own trauma, more freedom to actually make their way out of these symptoms that actually led to better results.
Correct. Right. Yeah. I don't know what it is that causes the benefit, but it seems to have a lot of benefit for a lot of people, and I think a lot more people should do it as opposed to just taking the drugs and hoping that levels them out or something.
Yes. Somewhat less good about some of Freud's theories are his theories about dreams, which he believed are basically just expressions of repressed sexual desires.
He thought everything was about the sex.
Yes.
Everything was, it had to do with how you potty trained. Relax, dude. All right.
Well, he believed
not everything's about sex.
He believed that basically the majority of our mental processes, like the way we actually think, is unconscious. And a lot of that's driven by just our pure desires for things in life. And he also believed in the Oedipus complex, named after the Greek tragedy of Oedipus, who ended up killing his dad and marrying his mom on accident. But the Oedipus complex is this belief that Freud had that in every child's life, he tries to compete with the father for the mother, which I don't really know why he believed that, but that was the thing that he believed, and that was the thing that he believed was the root cause of many issues.
Well, he supports my theory, which I've mentioned before in this podcast, I think, that all psychologists and psychiatrists have mental health problems.
You have mentioned
significant mental health problems. So that's why they were so interested in studying it, because they're like, oh, what is wrong with me? And this is interesting. Maybe this is what's wrong with me. And so he's just kind of a nut job when it comes to his theories about the mind and the causes for everything. But I think he had some interesting and correct ideas about like your dreams, maybe a window into what you're worried about or what's going on in your mind, and his theories about maybe you're going to get to the id and the ego. It's fascinating. And I think there's a lot of truth to it, but everything to him goes back to sex. It's like, oh, come on, relax, dude. and it really has been destructive, I think, because, in some ways it's liberating. I get that, because it used to be a whole different society than what it is now. But now it's just a license to do anything, because now, if you say publicly, I'm going to refrain from sexual activity for any period of time, it's considered bizarre, and you're like repressed, and it's some sort of like mental illness. And of course, his whole thing was that that's what drives you. And so if you repress that, it's like damming up a stream, and it's going to overflow the dam and cause more damage later, or whatever the analogy would be. And I think that's been very very destructive in the last 50 years.
Kenny kind of says that, not exactly in those words, but he kind of says that, Freud's biggest impact wasn't necessarily his exact theories, but just kind of the impact he had on just kind of like pop culture, I guess, as a whole, the opinion of the people. He kind of says, like, you see in the years afterwards, there's a greater, straying away from like abstinence, and just a more openness about those sorts of things. And like you're saying about the id, the ego, and the superego, those were the three big parts of what Freud believed kind of our mental processes are. The id was just our primitive desires. The ego was kind of formed by society, kind of the societal impact on us, like how we're expected to perform. And then our superego is kind of us repressing our own desires. That's the purely human thing that separates us from animals, is that we're able to repress those desires and move on with our lives.
Yeah. I'm more of the thought that you're closer to good and closer to your true self the more you restrict your passions, one way or the other. I mean, I know there's a limit to that, but I think you're less in tune with being productive and happy the more license you have to just act on your whims and your pleasures and all that stuff.
It's very much like the Stoic way of living.
Right.
Go all the way back to the beginning.
Yeah, I'm completely more in the Stoic field, and especially as I get older. And I think even Aristotle said, and I don't know how old he lived to before he died, but I think it was Aristotle that said, that one of the good things about getting older is that you're less bound by your passions, and there's a lot of truth to that, because you have a different kind of emotional setup when you're in your teens and 20s than you are when you're 50, like me. You can kind of just let it right out the storm, type of thing.
I think the best thing that Freud kind of contributed as a whole is really the concept of mental health as a whole, because he really was one of the first to actually treat mentally ill patients as actual invalids, rather than either dangerous bad people.
Right.
He recognized that there was a way to treat these people. While his treatments may not have been the best, his theories may not have been the best, he was one of the first to actually recognize that you can help those people and not just lock them away for the rest of their lives. And that was a very important step for people to take.
Right. Yeah, that they're ill as opposed to evil, or that they're cursed, or they did something bad, and that's why they're possessed by demons, or whatever the case may be. But now we're at the opposite end of that spectrum, where we think that all evil is explained by illness. Like, you have a terrible murder. Oh, he's sick. No. I mean, some of them are, but some of them are just bad people. They just choose to do bad things. That's a big big rant that I always have about when people say that murderer was sick. No, he wasn't sick. Not all of them. Some of them just want to kill people. Well, that's sick. No, that's just evil.
It would be sick for you to do that. Something majorly tragic would have to happen for if you're in a good mental state and you don't want to kill people, for you to suddenly want to kill people. Maybe that would be sick. But if they just
it depends on why I did it.
Well, I guess that's true.
I mean, if it's a psychotic break, you're sick.
Yes. If
you just say, I've had enough, and I just start going out and killing people, I'm not ill. I'm evil. right? And I think people just miss that. And sometimes guys just go out and murder people. And I don't think the general public understands that it happens.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always happened throughout history. Sometimes you just wake up and you're having a really bad day and you just decide to kill somebody. Now, I won't do that. But there are other people in this world that will do it. Or people that will kill someone or rape or murder or whatever, or rob, if given the opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
And without a deterrence, some people will just be doing that, just waiting for the opportunity. Oh, I'm on a deserted street corner. There's some lady over there. Boom, they do it because they think they can get away with it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he's sick. No, he's just a bad freaking person. And they need to be punished. And if you don't punish them, then the rest of them will say, oh, the risk reward. And the reward is the murder. And people do think like that. And that's kind of a scary thought, but it's out there. And so anyway, getting back into what he did was good for the time, because too many people were like, well, they're bad people because they're ill or they're somehow cursed by God or whatever the case may be. And he's like, no, they might just be ill. They might be sick. And there are a lot of people with mental health problems that were better off, because he pointed that out, a lot more compassion for them.
Mm-hmm.
End of rant.
Yeah, so with that out of the way, moving on to Husserl's Phenomenology. I'm guessing that's how you pronounce his name.
Phenomena.
Oh,
Do,
no.
do, 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 do. Oh, I spiked it.
You really just peaked there. Yeah. Husserl's Phenomenology. So Edmund Husserl sought to explain numerical concepts by identifying mental acts of origin. So he really believed that everything kind of went back to how we thought about things. So all of our, ideas about math and geometry and arithmetic, that sort of thing, that all goes back to the mind.
I was reading through this and I'm like, this makes absolutely no sense. And then I get to the point where Anthony Kennedy's like, yeah, then he repudiated everything he believed later in life. I'm like, what did I even learn? Why did I just learn about this crazy guy that had that had a theory that even 0 and 1 are not numbers, and he had this weird philosophical beliefs, and then he's like, never mind. He thought it was just wrong, and okay, well, I just wasted a half hour of my time reading about this guy. But yeah, this was a weird one. I didn't know anything about him either.
Very strange. He saw psychology as the basis of philosophy rather than logic.
Yeah.
So he really believed that everything was very much mental rather than any sort of physical, completely concrete, set in stone sort of truth that is the basis of everything. It's all mental. With that, he used the Platonic concepts and propositions and those sorts of things. So really going way back to the ancient Greeks to formulate his ideas. He believed that there were two things necessary to thought: content and possessor. So act with matter. So every thought, he believed, was really an action that we have. And, there's two parts of that. If I think about a dog, the possessor is me. I'm the one thinking. The dog is the content. And so that's really what's necessary for all thinking, which kind of sounds redundant. I feel like that's just something that we know.
Maybe that was a groundbreaking theory back then, but it seemed pretty common sense. I envision some of these guys having conversations with a farmer in a field during their day. And this guy explaining for like 2 hours the object and I'm the possessor and that's the object, and the farmer's like, yeah, I saw that dog too. It's just like, okay, well, you just restated what everybody already knows. So you're some great thinker. I don't know, you already figured that out.
His really actual groundbreaking thing was phenomenology, which is the study... Oh my God. The study of immediate data of consciousness. So really kind of just looking at what we actually think, the data of how we actually think rather than, how we should think, really just how it is. And he believed...
And how is it? How it is?
Well, he believed that all inferences and conjectures were based on immanent perception. So how we know ourselves really determines how we actually perceive other things. So how we, use our own senses to look at things.
How else would we do it?
I don't know.
I don't understand this. I mean, I was reading this. I'm like, how is this not saying stuff that's already been said 1,000 times? I must be missing something with this. Maybe it'll be explained in more detail in later chapters, but I just didn't get it. Do you get it?
I think it's really just kind of breaking it down into that, our consciousness is the prime mover of everything, really. Because he believed that there was immanent perception and transcendent perception. And transcendent perception, I think, was, the process of using our consciousness to look at the world around us, but we need to know our own consciousness, be able to think before we do anything else.
Isn't that like Descartes?
I think so.
Okay.
It's similar.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I'm not a philosopher.
Yeah, you are now, man.
Yes.
Welcome to the world of philosophy.
Moving on to the existentialism of Heidegger. And Heidegger made a lot more sense than Husserl did to me. So he believed that the first task, he also used phenomenology. He believed that the first task of phenomenology was to study the concept of being. So we have to actually know what is being before we know anything else. And he believed that in this thing called the Dasein.
Wait, before you get to that.
Okay.
I like this little excerpt here from Anthony Kenny where he says, Heidegger set himself the task of inventing a pristine vocabulary that would enable, as it were, to philosophize in the nude. Basically, he created his own vocabulary for, like you're about to get into it. Like he's going to start it all over again with his own new vocabulary and new words and all that.
Yeah.
It's kind of arrogant, but
yes. I think I pronounced it wrong the first time. The Dasein, maybe? The sign? I don't know.
Doesn't matter. He made it up.
So the Dasein is what he kind of believed was the origin of all thought, the origin of all consciousness, basically. The origin of all being, I guess I should say. And he believed that the Dasein is a thinking thing with care or interest in the world. And Kenny kind of says, well, that seems very similar to the Cartesian ego,
right.
A thing that thinks. But what kind of differentiated that is with care and interest. You have to actually care about the world around you. You're not just thinking, because if you're just thinking, arbitrarily, you're not really part of being. But really, you have to actually care about what's in the world, desire to learn more. And that's what really makes you human.
I guess. I did like this little excerpt where he says, only if I have some care about or interest in the world will I go on to ask questions about it and give answers to those questions in the form of knowledge claims. Mm-hmm. Which I don't know that it's that much different than Descartes, but I guess it's further explaining what Descartes' ego would be. You know, it's like, okay, well, not only are you thinking, you have to care enough to think and explain it, I guess.
And a lot of it's kind of setting up, what we want to be in the future. That's kind of also where that care and that interest comes from, to actually desire to go further. And he kind of says that death kind of terminates these desires, but it does not complete them.
Right.
And so really this kind of fear of death is what he really believed leads to guilt and anxiety, because he believed that's kind of the difference between what I will be and what I might have been.
Right.
What will happen, if I don't complete these desires, if I don't achieve what I want, well, that's where we get our guilt and our anxiety. It's kind of similar. Well, I guess guilt is more looking in the past. I didn't want to do these things I didn't do these things that I wanted to achieve, and that's where my guilt comes from.
I do like where he's talking about that kind of in the future, in the past type thing, where he's where Kenny explains that his philosophy is, I can be what I have not yet been, and my potentialities are essential to my being as my achievements are. Mm-hmm. And I really believe that is true, and that's a good explanation of how you're, like you see these signs now, these anti-suicide signs that are all over the town and this community. I don't know if it's a nationwide thing or what it is, but where it's, your past does not define you. Mm-hmm. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. Although I think your past describes you, but it doesn't define you, because you could be better. Mm-hmm. And I don't think you're absolved for anything you've done in the past, unless God absolves you. But I think it's important to know that, and as Heidegger, would say, and Mr. Kenny explains, that you're more than just what you've done or what you've been. You're that plus what you could have been and what you may be in the future. Mm-hmm.
I think that's, I agree with that. Yeah. But I do think it is still important to say that, you can be judged on your past. It doesn't necessarily define you, but it is definitely a big part of you. And if you're likely to still make those mistakes, if there's no sign of improving, then I think it's very justified to judge you on your past actions.
Well, yeah. I mean, I guess it depends on what you mean by judge. Mm-hmm. If you're talking about it in the legal sense, or, your final judgment isn't until later,
Yeah.
You still have that plenty of time. Well, you don't know how much time you have, but until you die, you can get forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
I'm you might not know it, but I'm a big believer of the Church of Second Chances.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't know how many more beyond two. The second one I believe with, but I think people ought to be given a second chance and stuff, because we all make mistakes.
Yes.
Some you kind of cross the line, but I don't think that you can truly judge a person based upon only what they have done, unless they've died, and then it's God's decision to judge them at that point. But there's a lot of anti-judgment stuff in the Bible.
Yeah.
I don't know if you noticed that, but judge not lest ye be judged, and all this other stuff. But at the same time, Jesus didn't free those two dudes on the crucifix. Those guys died with him.
Yeah, that's
and one
true.
guy was like, "Yeah, I deserved it." The other guy's like, "Free us."
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, that was deep.
Yeah, that was deep.
Where were we at?
Well, I was about to move on to existentialism.
Oh, we're going on to Sartre?
No,
Sartre?
No, this was still within.
Okay.
Yeah, with Heidegger.
Sorry,
because that was really the idea that he proposed initially is existentialism, which is that individuals are not mere members of a species and not determined by universal law. So really, what I am is what I freely take myself to be. Like what you were saying is that I'm not bound to just be another human. I am myself. I'm an individual, and I can go on and do something that I want to do. I have my own goals, which very much contradicts, I think, Heidegger's actions, because he was a German, and he very much welcomed Nazism and kicked out all of the Jewish professors in the school that he rose to power in. And that was just so weird to me, because he's saying, I'm not just a member of a species. I have my own ideals. And then he kicked out all of the people of a certain religion. And it's like,
well, it's not just a certain religion. It's the Jews.
Yes.
Because, there are a lot of people who just hate the Jews. I've never understood it. And they'd be very good people and rational people, but as soon as you mention the Jews, and the Jews are after us, or they're so evil, it's weird. But evidently he was very German.
Yes.
Very thought that they would carry on a historic spiritual mission through Nazism.
Don't you think that's just completely contradictory to what he thinks with existentialism?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's just so bizarre that he would just be like, yeah, that makes sense. Get rid of all the Jews.
I think you underestimate everybody's ability to act inconsistent with their own professed values.
Yeah, I guess. I guess so.
They're the teachers who refuse to teach. There's more examples of people acting inconsistent with their professed values than consistent with them. Don't you think? I mean, I think I see that day in and day out. Of course, I'm in the legal system, so I see it more often, maybe, or more in a bright contrast between what you say you believe in and what you do. Especially those in the criminal justice system or the domestic stuff, where they believe certain things about what a being a good parent is or being a good person is, but then they're like, but they did these other things, and they always justify it. Everybody always wants a better deal than everybody else, which is always so funny. Nobody wants to be treated like everyone else. Everybody wants the backroom deal.
Well, I guess that also kind of goes back to existentialism. I shouldn't be treated as just part of this group. I should be treated as myself. And
which is always superior to everybody else.
Yes.
Which is never like, I should be treated just upon my own merits. And I'm not as good as everybody else. I should be treated worse than... No, they don't. Nobody says that. Everybody says I should be treated better.
Well, everybody has main character syndrome. They think that they deserve better treatment because they are their own person. They're the star of their own show.
Yes, everybody's a hero in their own story, myself included. I mean, I suffer from that just like everybody else does. Although I'm more aware of it, so I think that I am less likely to suffer from it.
So like the Socrates approach, I know that I know nothing, so I'm better at knowing nothing than everybody else.
I am smarter than you because I know that I don't know anything. Yes, you are too stupid to know you don't know anything. Therefore, I am smart. You fool.
That was how Socrates was put to death.
Yeah, they didn't like him. I did like how this quote, I have it in quotes here, because he's talking about Heidegger's book Being in Time, which is, I forget what the translation, it's an English version. It says, is it a difficult book to read, and any interpreter who wishes to make its ideas seem readily intelligible has to write in a style very different from Heidegger's own. That was great. Thank you for giving me that information, Mr. Kenny, because now I will certainly never read any Heidegger in the original format.
Moving on to the existentialism of Sartre, which I guess is how you pronounce his name. It's French. It's Sartre.
Yeah.
No.
What is the theory again that he likes?
Existentialism?
The other one, phenomenology.
All right. So Sartre believed that only by reflection that we make the self into an object, and that the self kind of lies outside of our own consciousness. So it's really kind of dependent on how people perceive us, really. And that's kind of how we look at ourselves. We have to kind of look in the mirror rather than just looking within and kind of judge from the outside.
What do you think about Sartre? I kind of like.
I like Sartre.
Yeah, it seemed pretty interesting.
I think it's kind of. He's kind of saying, well, like, get rid of main character syndrome. You know, don't. Right. It's kind of like what you were saying. Judge me like actually on my own merits rather than who I think I am.
Yeah. And I liked how Mr. Kenny points out the inconsistency in this guy's views, because he's basically a Marxist communist, but he was like this big believer in individualism, and that every individual person is different and to be treated differently, but everybody lines up for Marxism, I guess.
Yeah. And so Sartre believed, in regards to being, that being is what underlies all the different kinds and aspects of things in consciousness. So basically kind of the underlying principle of how we view things and what those things actually are. That is what being is. And he believed that we kind of articulate the world through negation. So he kind of uses the example of, how do I know what is red? And he says, well, we kind of just group things into two categories, red and not red.
Right.
And I know what is red by looking at everything that isn't red, if that makes sense.
It does.
It does.
It does. Because how do you know what red is except for that what is not red?
Yes.
Because otherwise everything is just the same. So yeah, and he's a big, the big thing is about the freedom, individual choice.
Which is something that you've reiterated over and over again on this podcast.
What?
That you're a big believer in free will.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Over anything else, really.
I guess so.
Yeah. You don't seem happy about that.
Yeah.
So he believed that human freedom precedes the essence of man and makes it possible. So he kind of says that, we don't even have our own essence until we have the freedom to make our own essence.
Correct.
Our own individuality is based on what we actually decide to do.
Right.
Our own thoughts, our own actions. There is no set of rules for what is man. Every man is individual to his own freedom, his own choices.
Right. And there's so much truth to that it's like like he says, it's the building block of being an individual human. If you don't have that, then we're not who we think we are, which is sentient beings with freedom of choice. I think he's right that it starts there. Your being as a separate individual starts there. And I think that's really fundamentally that separates us from some of the other animals, is that complete freedom of choice where we really can contemplate the options and choose them, and even choose bad things. And I don't know that suicide is unique. I know it's not unique to humans, but the deliberate suicide certainly is, I think. And not that I'm advocating for that or anything, but it really shows how much freedom of choice we have. We can harm ourselves. We can do bad things to others. We can do bad things to ourselves.
And Sartre kind of says that. He says it's absolute and alarming.
Right.
That's what human freedom is. And he kind of says that we could try to take roles in society to almost limit our freedom.
Right.
He kind of points to society and religion, too, as kind of trying to limit our freedom. And I don't know if I necessarily agree with that.
Really?
I don't know particularly about like morality. He points to morality, like roles in morality, as limiting freedom. Because I would kind of say that more understanding our morality almost makes us more free. If we know what is right and what is wrong better, then we can make better decisions and, be more free to choose the right thing and make our own good path, I guess.
That doesn't make you any more or less free.
I guess. It just
because you're still choosing, but I think morality and society, especially if you have a good moral framework, it helps you. It makes it easier to make decisions.
I guess that's true.
Because once you have a framework in, like whatever your framework is, like what the utilitarians say, the what's the best for the most people, and they just do the math. And that has a limiting principle to your freedom in a sense, because then you're trying to maximize the value to everybody. And then you have, other philosophers, or maybe, religious beliefs of every individual has their own worth and value, and that's preeminent. And so another person's needs and desires or really needs, I guess, would take precedence over your desires. Their needs would, I think it does. I don't know if it limits your freedom, but it helps you limit your own choices.
I guess what I'm kind of thinking is it gives our choices more weight, I guess. It would help us to kind of consider the outcome of, everything that we choose to do, based on our own moral code. And I think that's kind of what I'm going for, is it makes our decisions almost more important, I guess, to us, with the understanding that it is. Yeah.
More valuable, more important, and they carry a moral weight that otherwise a random choice or just kind of like, I'll do that today.
Yeah.
But I absolutely agree. But
because I guess that's where I'm kind of getting at with, more free, the more we understand our choices, I guess, kind of the more freedom we have, if that makes sense. Because otherwise is it even a choice at all if you're just acting randomly?
True. But I mean, you always, true. It's not really, I guess I'd say random, but you could, but if you have a religious philosophy, well, let's just give you an example, especially if you're in a formal religion, as opposed to just a belief system. So like, if I'm a devout Catholic, then I'm going, or Jew, or what, I guess I'll stick with the Catholic thing. It's going to limit my freedom in a very small way, because I have to go to church every Sunday or Saturday evening. And so I have limited, once I decide I'm going to do that, then every weekend, I'm giving up an hour of my freedom. But of course I'm choosing to do it, but, and so in a sense, you're limiting, what are your options to choose from? You're deciding yourself, of course, but you are limiting the categories of things that you're willing to do. Or
I guess
able
that
to
makes
do.
sense, yeah. If we're looking at more like the actual practice of religion,
right?
What are the actual customs I need to do, that sort
sure.
of thing.
But if you look at the framework of it, I mean, like the 10 Commandments, they're all what you shall not do. I mean, there's a couple of shalls, but most of it's you can't do this, you can't do that. And so once you adopt a religious philosophy, you are going to limit your options by choosing that. And so it's, in a sense, less free, I guess. It depends how you look at it, though, I guess. Yeah. Interesting.
Moving on to Jacques Derrida.
Is he the last one?
He is.
I like the spicy nacho ones.
What? Oh, Dorito. Okay.
What about Cool Ranch? You like Cool Ranch?
Okay.
Cool Ranch Jacques?
We're not talking.
Jacques Cool Ranch Derrida. That's what we would have nicknamed him if we went to college with him.
Okay.
His nickname would be Cool Ranch.
All right. Thanks for sharing, Dad. So this section actually about Derrida starts off with a different philosopher, who was J.L. Austin, who believed that there were two types of sentences. There were constative, which are just facts, saying like that wall is green, or, the sky is blue, it's just a thing. And there are performative sentences, which are speech acts that actually change things. And he kind of points to, I name this ship the Queen Anne, or I promise I'll do this, or those sorts of things, bets and promises and naming things. Those actually change things rather than just stating a fact.
Adam, I'm going to object that we're even talking about this guy.
Really?
Yes.
I thought that was interesting.
No, I mean, this whole part of the chapter, because this guy Derrida, Cool Ranch, even he rejected the idea that his work could be encapsulated in a thesis, that he had an overarching philosophy. And then Kenny goes on to say that, he goes on to defame anybody who's not a philosopher about psychologists, because psychology members have less practice in discerning genuine from counterfeit philosophy, which I really like that quote. But I don't know why we're even wasting our time talking about this.
Well, because I think Derrida was intentionally trying to make no sense. That's what I got from this.
Kind of like...
Is that he was trying to make fun of... Yeah. No. Diogenes.
Diogenes.
Yes.
Was what was the guy that named that the name of the guy that did the Labyrinth, who created Labyrinth? You know, the engineer.
That was Daedalus.
Daedalus, that's who I was thinking
yes.
of. Yeah, Daedalus.
Okay, what does that have anything to do with any of this?
I don't know.
Okay.
the name reminded me of Daedalus. Yes.
But what it seemed to me, as we're talking about Derrida, is that he was just making fun.
You mean Cool Ranch?
Is that he was just making fun of all of the other philosophers.
Do you think that's what he was doing?
I think that's absolutely what he was doing.
How do we
Because
know
I think
that?
Kenny says, like, at the end, some people actually take him seriously, while others, kind of see him as just a joke philosopher. And I think that's what he was. Because he kind of says here is that Derrida introduced technical terms with no definitions and unclear examples.
Yeah.
And he believed that there was a great importance on spoken word in society. He didn't like that. He believed everything should be more in writing. And Kenny says, well, all of the evidence points to the exact opposite. Everything needs to be in writing.
Right.
One of the only actual, I think, meaningful things he said was that speech is closest to thought. When we're talking, that's actually closest to our actual thought process as opposed to writing. That's kind of where he was coming from with that importance on the spoken word. And one of the quotes from Kenny was that he introduced new terms that confused things rather than clarified them. And when he was setting up all of his philosophical principles, he just wrote intentionally confusing things is what I got from this.
I'm thinking that this guy now I'm starting to think that, you're going to convince me, because I'm starting to think that maybe I should become a joke philosopher.
Yes, I think
I could be good at it.
Yes,
don't you think?
I think because you wanted to be a street philosopher. And I think that's exactly what you would do.
I also thought about creating my own religion.
Well, I just want to mention, he invented his own type of literary criticism, which is called a nosegay, which is where you just take arbitrary texts with the same word in them, and you just gather up a bunch of quotes from things that have the same word, and then you construct a thesis around them.
Yeah.
So if you just take the word blue and you just pull that out of 5 different books with the sentence with the word blue in them, and you just try to compare them all together, it doesn't mean anything. It gets you nowhere. But that's a literary criticism. So I think he was not trying to be taken seriously. I think he was trying to make fun of all these other philosophers.
Perhaps.
I think that was great.
More of a satirist.
Yes.
All right. Well,
he also, kind of echoing Freud, he randomly used sex and death as metaphors in his writing, with no real point to it. There was no point to using those concepts. And I think he was intentionally being confusing and
he did a good
ridiculous.
job.
Yes. Well,
all right. That concludes our chapter. It's a nice short chapter. I enjoyed it.
I enjoyed it.
What did you think?
I thought it was good.
What was your favorite one out of all of them?
I liked Derrida. I thought I thought it was entertaining to read about him.
You didn't like the Nazi?
I liked, as far as actual principles, I would say Sartre.
Oh, yeah. Right.
But I mean, Sartre kind of built off of Heidegger or similar principles. But
all right, yes. Good deal.
So you really don't think that Derrida was trying to be a satire?
I really have no idea.
Really?
I mean, I didn't read his stuff, so I'm just reading what Kenny has said about him. And
let me see. I thought he kind of explicitly said. Let me try to find
either way, I don't know that I care.
Well, I just thought it was entertaining. I thought you would.
Yeah.
I thought you would like somebody making fun of philosophers, because I know your least favorite thing is when they try to categorize things and invent new words that don't make any sense. So I thought you would get a kick out of that.
Yeah, but I mean, when I'm reading a book on the history of philosophy, I'm not reading a book about people who don't want to know about the history of philosophy or who want to mock it actively. But
he says, in regards to Derrida, he says, whatever he himself may say, he has been taken by many people to be a serious philosopher, and he should be evaluated as such. So I think he's kind of saying Derrida would say he's not a serious philosopher.
Yeah.
So I think he was trying to be a satirist.
Do you think the two of us could come up with a obnoxious philosophy?
Oh, I absolutely think we could. I think that would be very easy for us to do.
I don't know. It might be. I mean, it's hard to come up with an original idea.
Yeah.
And I almost wish I could be like Descartes. Descartes was well read, but it's almost impossible to come up with an original philosophical idea after a couple thousand years of people reading and writing and talking about it. And and people think they've discovered some new thought. Well, somebody in ancient Greece already thought of it, for crying out loud. That's 2,000 years ago. So I almost feel like I wish I was ignorant of all of it, and then I could come up with an original idea. I wonder if I was ignorant. If someone's ignorant of all the other philosophers, can they come up with something original more with more ease, or would it be better, easier to come up with an original idea, knowing all the other ideas, and then coming up with an original idea of your own? Is it more likely you come up with something original if you have or have not read everyone else's ideas?
I think if you have absolutely no knowledge of philosophy, it'd be very hard to come up with something original. Because I think you get to just a very basic principle that's been echoed by like a million philosophers.
Right, probably.
But I think it's also pretty equally hard to have read all of the philosophers and try to make up something new. Because then when you're trying to make up something new, you're just like, oh, well, this is just echoing this person. And if you try to edit it, well, that's just echoing this other person. So it's hard to say.
Well, when I was in my senior year of college, I forget what the book was. I think it was might have been Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance.
Wait, what?
There was a book. Have you ever read that book?
No, I have no idea what you're talking about.
It was written by some hippie, and he came out with a sequel. Or maybe that was the sequel. I can't remember. But he had like this big hippie book.
Okay.
All the hippies loved it. And it's like it's kind of like a novel, kind of a philosophy, whatever it was. I very vague memories of it because I kind of blocked it out. And anyway, this author came out, or somebody came out with a very similar book, almost like a sequel to it. And one of my professors was super stoked about it. And so I read it, and then it was a senior seminar, senior thesis, where it's super easy. We read like 2 books. You wrote a paper about each one of them, and then you get an A for a 3-credit course. It's great. And so I read it. I'm like, my Lord, this is just Plato's forms. And so I wrote a paper just saying this is completely Plato's forms, and went into some detail about it. And the professor was kind of crestfallen. Really? Because he realized that this thing that he thought was so original really wasn't. When he's like, oh, you had a point. It was just kind of like, it was hard for this author and all that. And then I always wanted to look up later, because I kind of felt like he was going to steal my ideas and maybe publish it or something. Because it was actually it was a pretty decent analysis of it, but I did try to look it up later under his name. I can't remember his name now, but to see if he published anything after that talk. But it was just kind of an example of, if you really look at it, I mean, there's so many basic themes in philosophy that just kind of echo throughout the ages, and it'd be hard to come up with a new one. I think you can come up with like a ridiculous religion. Like, I have a lot of respect for the Mormons, because there's a lot of stuff that you kind of say, well, it doesn't really make sense about the Christian religion. Especially like Catholics, believe in the transfiguration, all that kind of stuff, and then the Pentecost. I mean, there's all sorts of things that kind of don't make sense intellectually. But with the Mormons, they just came up with some really crazy shit. This guy's in Smith or whatever it was, and we were talking about how he got chased out of Missouri a couple weeks ago. And I mean, they were ready to murder this guy, and then he ultimately was murdered. And so I got a lot of respect for them to go along with that stuff, and I got a lot of respect for that guy for creating a whole new book of the Bible and stuff. And he got, I guess, millions now. Yeah, believe that religion. That's pretty impressive. So maybe I should write, the Gospel According to Mark, Volume 2. What do you think? I mean, there's already been a Mark. I'm Mark. Why can't I write a gospel? Why can't I be a prophet?
I guess that depends on how devoted you are to Catholicism.
Well, who knows? I mean, how do you really know if you're a prophet or not?
Well, I feel like you'd know by now.
Was any prophet called later in life?
I don't know. I don't know off the top of my head. I'm sure they were.
Well, like,
'cause there was a lot of them.
John the Baptist's mom. What was her name?
Mary Magdalene?
No.
Elizabeth.
Elizabeth.
Yes.
I think that's right. Because she was childless, and according to the Bible, she was older. And so she was called to do that later in life a little bit. So maybe
You're
I'm
still holding out hope.
Maybe I'm hearing the calling now. Maybe I should start
write the Gospel of Mark, Volume 2.
I need to get some papyrus. But anyway,
what would be the events of the Gospel of Mark, Part 2?
I really have no idea. This is the first time I've even thought of such a thing.
I feel like you should start with just philosophy rather than complete blasphemy.
Yeah. That's a point well taken.
Yeah.
I'll start. You know what I was actually thinking the other day? I need to start writing poetry.
Oh my God.
Angry, insulting poetry. Because how many angry, insulting poets are you familiar with? Are there? I don't know anything about literature because I don't really read poetry, but I mean angry poetry, just really, really mean poetry.
I don't know off the top of my head.
I think there's a market for it.
Okay.
And then we can set it to music. But it'd be like lighthearted music, like circus music, but angry.
Just like a bunch of limericks set to like Irish drinking tunes, but they're all very well. I guess that would be angry poetry.
That is true. That is very true. Thank you. Yes.
Irish limericks are all about like hating the English,
or sadness or sorrow, and that is poetry. Thank you. Yes. All right. Well, I guess I can't do that. It's been done already.
I think you could still do it. I don't think.
I think I do that well. I think I do insult poetry very well. Wouldn't you love to see me as the poet laureate of the laureate of the United States? Angry, like you get up there at the big podium, like the inauguration.
Well, at that point, you have to do something like really ridiculous, like not even read a poem, just like point out people in the audience and insult them.
Well, that's just like a stand-up comic, which is also one of my goals in life. Yeah, but I don't have the. I'm not funny enough. That's the problem. I wish I was funnier.
All right.
I could be a comedian if I was funnier. It's the only thing standing in my way. I could be the best comedian ever.
It reminds me of this clip that I've seen a whole bunch online of this Italian guy who's cooking with some like British like morning talk show hosts, and it's some sort of authentic recipe, and this British host turns to him and is like, oh, if you put ham in there, it'd be like a British carbonara. Yeah. And he's just like so baffled. He looks at her, he's like stunned in silence for it. He goes, well, if my grandmother had wheels, she would have been a bicycle. It's like, what are you talking about? That's not what we're making. You really like that?
That's good. I do like it. Yes. All right, so you're a big fan of Sartre.
Yes, existentialism.
Existentialism.
Big emphasis on freedom.
Yeah, I like that too.
Yes. All right. Well, this has been Unlimited Opinions. You can still follow us on Twitter.
And what was the call signs for that Twitter radio station? What? What did you just say? You're give us the call signs for the Twitter radio station, right?
Capital U, lowercase LMD, opinions with a capital O. Yes. It's a Twitter handle. All right. Well, I've been Adam Bishop.
I'm still Mark Bishop.
This has been Unlimited Opinions.
All right, good night.
So when are you going to get started on the comedian career?
I'm working on it now. It's my comedy podcast.
That's not what this is.
Oh, yeah. That's all. That's what the viewer is saying. It's not a comedy podcast. It's not funny.